I didn't scream, I didn't yell, I didn't even ask questions. When I realized what was happening, I just left, quietly, like a ghost in my own life. Maybe I should have seen it sooner. Maybe I didn't want to. 3.5 years of marriage, and all it took was one forgotten piece of clothing, a pink bra to rip the curtain down. Not a text, not lipstick on a collar, a bra, stuffed halfway under the passenger seat of my wife's car, like a secret trying too hard not to be found. That moment burned into my memory like a flash grenade. Let me back up. We met at a summer cookout 5 years ago. She was magnetic, sharp, confident, stunning. The kind of woman who made you straighten your posture without realizing. Me, I was more of a flannel shirt and sarcasm guy. Somehow we clicked. Maybe it was chemistry. Maybe it was fate. Maybe it was just bad timing dressed up as something magical. The first few months were a whirlwind. Everything about her felt exciting, new, like I was dating the future version of everything I'd ever hoped for. After 18 months, we got married and moved into a sleek downtown apartment while saving for a house. We had plans, big ones. Travel, a family, building something real. But somewhere after year 3, things shifted. It was gradual, the kind of change you don't notice until it's too late. She started working later. Her phone became something she guarded like a state secret. Work dinners became a regular excuse. When I asked if everything was okay, she'd fire back with, "You travel all the time. You don't get to question me." Except I didn't. Not really. My job had me out of town for a few days every month, tops. But somehow, that became her shield. Tried to believe her. I really did. But then came the arguments, always over nothing. Her fuse was shorter, her patience thinner. And our closeness? That started to vanish like morning fog. She said it was just stress, promotions, office politics. But I could feel the wall growing between us, brick by silent brick. Then came that night. It was mid-September. We'd just come back from a grocery run. She had a work thing later, some happy hour or whatever. I offered to carry in the bags. That's when I saw it. Pink lace, barely peeking out from under the passenger seat. It was hers. I recognized the brand. She had a drawer full of them. But here's the thing. She never left her clothes in the car, ever. And for it to be there, crumpled and forgotten, I knew something was off. Deep in my gut, I knew. My hands started shaking as I brought the bags inside. She looked at me, her eyes narrowed. "You okay? You look pale." I mumbled something, probably lied, probably said I was just tired. Inside, my chest felt like it was full of broken glass. I didn't confront her. I didn't even mention it. Instead, I told myself to wait, to watch, to be sure. That night, I lay awake replaying the last few months like a crime scene. Every late night, every snapped reply, every cold shoulder. The next morning, I decided to test something. That Friday, I cooked dinner. Her favorite, set the table with candles, even bought a bottle of wine she used to love. I wanted to see if there was anything left, if she'd still choose us if I gave her the chance. She walked in, took one look at the table, and apologized. "I have to go out with the team again. Just for a drink. I'll shower quick." My heart sank. While she showered, I stood in the kitchen staring at the dinner like it was a tombstone. Then I opened the trash can and dumped everything in. Plate by plate, glass by glass. Like I was burying a corpse no one would ask about. Then I did something I never thought I'd do. I took my work phone, my backup, and slipped it into her car under the back seat. I had a location tracker installed. Nothing fancy. Just something I used when I traveled for emergencies. I needed to know where she was really going. She came out of the bathroom, all dressed up, flawless as ever. Asked if I was mad. I said I was just sad, she scoffed. "You're being dramatic." Then she left. I waited 10 minutes, then opened the tracker, blue dot. Bar downtown, so far, so predictable. But I had to see it for myself. I drove down, parked across the street, stayed in the car, heart pounding so hard it made my vision shake. For an hour I watched people come and go, laughing, drinking, living lives untouched by betrayal. Then I saw her. She walked out with someone, a man, tall, clean-cut, confident, not just a coworker. No way. You can always tell. It was the way he leaned toward her, the way her body language softened, invited him closer. He said something. She laughed. Then he kissed her, right there on the sidewalk. No hesitation, no fear, no shame. She kissed him back. I froze. It felt like my lungs had stopped working. Then they got into his car. I followed. Not far. Just 10 minutes to a hotel off the freeway. I watched them go inside together. No bags, no business. just her and him, vanishing behind sliding glass doors. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even feel real. I just sat in my car staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror, wondering how the hell I got here. And that's when I made the decision. No confrontations, no fights, no scenes. Was done. She didn't know it yet, but I was already gone. I sat outside the hotel like a shadow, motor off, lights dim, heart hollow, watching those sliding doors swallow her and that man whole. I don't know how long I stayed there. Maybe minutes, maybe an hour. Time didn't feel real anymore. I should have stormed in, should have dragged her out by the truth. But instead I gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles cracked. My pulse was in my ears, loud and constant, like a warning siren that wouldn't shut off. This wasn't just betrayal. It was the erasure of everything I believed we were. Eventually I started driving. No destination. No music. Just the soft hum of the engine and my thoughts clawing at me like crows. I kept picturing them. Her, with him, laughing, touching, doing everything she used to do with me. The worst part? I didn't feel rage. I felt small, like a piece of furniture someone forgot to take when moving on. 30 miles later, I found a tavern on the edge of nowhere. A quiet little dive with neon signs and tired country music bleeding out the windows. I walked in like a ghost. Sat at the bar, ordered a drink with a voice I barely recognized as my own. The bartender, a middle-aged woman with crow's feet and kind eyes, looked at me sideways. "You look like someone just ripped the rug out from under you," she said. I forced a smile. Something like that. A guy slid onto the stool beside me, rugged, flannel shirt. The kind of face that's seen hard winters and harder stories. We exchanged nods, didn't talk for a bit. Then he said, "Wife?" I turned to him, startled. "What makes you say that?" He chuckled. "Man walks into a bar like that, it's either a funeral or a woman. Sometimes both." I laughed, bitter and broken. "You're not wrong. We got to talking. His name was Rye. Salt of the earth type, lived nearby. Told me he'd been through something similar a few years back. Came home early from a job and found his wife playing house with her coworker. Said he packed a bag that night and never looked back. There's two paths after something like this," he told me. "You can drown or you can walk away while you still have pieces of yourself left." I didn't know which one I was on yet. I just knew I couldn't go home. Not tonight. Not with her scent still in the sheets and lies in the air. "You got somewhere to go?" he asked. I shrugged. "Not really. I got an old trailer sitting on a bit of land near the hills. It ain't fancy, but it's got running water and peace. If you want to disappear for a while, might be just what you need." I stared at him, unsure if he was serious. He was. The bartender nodded toward him. "If I'd had that option when my ex imploded our life, I'd have taken it in a heartbeat." Maybe it was the drink. Maybe it was fate again, this time showing up in plaid and offering me an escape route. I said I'd think about it. That night, I didn't go home. I slept in my car, parked under a tree at a rest stop, jacket over my shoulders, and my phone screen lighting up every hour from her texts. "Are you okay? Let me know if you need anything." "I'm worried." I didn't reply. She had no idea I'd seen her, and I wasn't going to give her a single clue. In the morning, I drove back, showered, pretended everything was normal. She was in the kitchen pouring coffee like we were still a functioning couple. I looked at her and felt nothing, just a growing void. She asked where I'd gone last night. I told her I was with friends. She nodded, didn't press. Maybe she was relieved. Maybe she already had her backup plan ready. That weekend I visited Rye's place. The trailer wasn't bad at all. About 26 feet long, decent condition, nestled under trees on a slope that overlooked a wide valley. There were trails nearby, a creek that sang at night, and more stars than I'd seen in years. I breathed deeper out there. I hadn't realized how suffocating city air had become. Rye offered it cheap, said I could fix it up if I stayed a while. I told him I'd take it. Now I had a plan. Over the next few weeks, I began moving my things out of the apartment one quiet trip at a time. Tools, clothes, my guitar, the pieces of me that mattered. She never noticed. Or maybe she did, but chose not to ask. I didn't argue with her anymore. Didn't try to fix anything. She was polite suddenly, oddly sweet, like a host trying to keep a guest comfortable. It was too late for that. I'd seen behind the curtain. No amount of sugar could cover the rot underneath. She kept going on. Her work outings. I stopped asking, stopped caring. I had a new focus, disappear without a trace. One night, as she was getting ready to leave, I grabbed my coat too. She looked surprised. "Where are you going?" "Out with some people." "You don't know them," I replied. That's what she used to tell me, word for word. Her expression cracked just for a second. Then she smiled tightly and said, "Have fun." I didn't say goodbye. I just left. Back at the trailer, I started fixing it up, replaced the locks, scrubbed the floors, set up my laptop and gear. It wasn't much, but it was mine. No lies in the walls, no perfume I didn't recognize. Just quiet. Rai introduced me to some of his friends. Real people, kind people. They didn't ask questions. They just handed me a beer and made space around the fire. That first night under the stars, I realized I hadn't felt safe in months. She told me the following week that she had to go on a work trip, 3 days with the executive team. I asked, who was going? She got defensive. I let it slide. Then I made my final decision. She wouldn't be coming back to an apartment with me in it. She packed for her work trip like it was just another business jaunt. Rolled her blazers into her suitcase, checked off toiletries, grabbed her work phone. I watched her move around the apartment like nothing was wrong, like we were still the couple who used to argue about paint colors and takeout orders, not the strangers we'd become. She smiled as she zipped her bag. "I'll be back Thursday night." I nodded. "Safe travels." And just like that, she was gone. What she didn't know was that I wasn't planning to be there when she got back. For the next few hours, I moved like I was on autopilot, methodical, focused. I packed only what was mine: clothes, my laptop, the tools I'd bought, a few sentimental items I couldn't leave behind. I didn't touch anything we'd bought together. No furniture, no dishes. Nothing she could later accuse me of stealing. I wanted a clean exit. No drama, no footprints. The last thing I did was write a note. At first it was long. Pages of hurt, betrayal, confusion. But then I crumpled it up and started over. I kept it simple, just 9 words scrawled on a sticky note I left on the kitchen table. I hope it was worth it. Paul. Next to it I placed my wedding ring, and then I walked out. The air outside felt different. Colder, sharper. Like the atmosphere itself was reminding me that everything had changed. I didn't look back, didn't lock the door behind. That place wasn't my home anymore. The trailer was waiting for me, already half-stocked with my essentials. I pulled in, locked the door behind me, and sat on the tiny built-in couch. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding for 3 years. I was free. It didn't feel good yet, but it felt done. The next few days were quiet. I stayed offline. Ignored my phone. When Thursday rolled around, I imagined her walking into the apartment, calling my name, seeing the note, and realizing what she'd lost. I wondered if her face would fall, if she'd cry, if she'd immediately text me or start spinning a story to friends about how I overreacted. But none of that mattered. I wasn't coming back. When she finally did text me, it started off subtle. "Hey, I'm home. Where are you? You didn't say you'd be gone. Call me." Then the texts started stacking. Is this some kind of joke? "Paul, what the hell is going on? I need to talk to you now." I didn't respond. I didn't even open them. Then the calls started. Over and over. I turned the phone off. By the second day, she looped in her mom. That was when I knew. She was starting to panic. Her mom left a voicemail, awkward and forced. "I'm not sure what's happening, but Kathy is really worried. Please call her." I didn't. She didn't reach out to my father. Smart move. We barely speak, and he's not one for family drama. That left her stranded in a silence she'd never seen coming. And for once, I was the one in control. Every morning I started running again. I'd wake up, lace up, and take off down the trails near the foothills. There was a stillness here that healed something in me. No cars honking, no passive-aggressive conversations, just birdsong, wind, and the rhythmic beat of my own feet on the dirt. I started feeling like a person again. Rai stopped by often, sometimes bringing supplies, sometimes just a six-pack. We'd sit outside the trailer and talk about nothing, the kind of nothing that meant everything. One night he asked, "Me, do you regret not confronting her?" I shook my head. "What would have changed?" He smiled. "Good answer." A week passed. Then 2. And then I got the text. The one that confirmed what I'd known all along. "I'm sorry, things got out of hand. There was someone. But it wasn't serious. I was overwhelmed. You were gone a lot. I made a mistake. A mistake. As if sleeping with another man for months was like forgetting to buy milk." Her mistake had a LinkedIn profile, a corporate ID badge, and probably a gym membership. Her mistake kissed her on the sidewalk like I'd never existed. I stared at the message, not because it surprised me, but because part of me had waited to hear it, needed it, that flicker of honesty buried under all the denial and gaslighting. And yet it didn't feel satisfying. It made me feel worse because she wasn't sorry she did it. She was sorry she got caught, and that's a whole different thing. I didn't reply. Instead, I switched my number 2 days later. I didn't want to hear the next phase, the begging, the manipulation, the crocodile tears. I wasn't playing her game. She was the one who burned the bridge. I just made sure she couldn't rebuild it with lies. Rye called me Mountain Man one evening. Said I had the look, scruffier now, leaner from all the trail running, calmer. I laughed for the first time in weeks. Maybe I was becoming someone else out here. Someone better. It wasn't easy. I had moments where I thought about her. Wondered if she cried herself to sleep. Wondered if she tried to tell her friends some half-baked story about how I abandoned her. But I kept coming back to one truth. She didn't fight for us when it mattered. She chose her secret over our marriage, and I chose peace over chaos. The silence didn't sit well with her. After I changed my number, Kathy shifted tactics. I started getting emails. At first they were short and vague. Can we talk? You don't understand everything. Please don't throw everything away. I deleted them without reading past the first lines. Then they got longer, more desperate. The tone changed from defensive to pleading. She claimed she'd made a mistake, that she'd ended it with the other man, that it had never meant anything, that she missed me, and still I said nothing. I knew if I cracked that door open even an inch, she'd wedge herself back into my life like smoke seeping under a doorframe. I wasn't ready for that. Maybe I never would be. Instead, I ran, literally. Every morning, I hit the trail like it owed me something, pushed myself harder, farther. There was a stretch near Rye's land that climbed through switchbacks and leveled out at a clearing with a view of the whole valley. I made it my finish line. My quiet little victory every morning. Out there, I felt clean, new, like I was slowly peeling off the dead skin of my old life. The locals started to recognize me. The gas station clerk nodded when I came in. The barista at the coffee shop asked if I was that guy living up in the trailer. I didn't confirm, but I didn't deny it either. Then came the real punch to the chest. One weekend, I was sitting outside a small cafe in the next town over, using their Wi-Fi to knock out some work stuff, when I heard it. Paul. I turned. Slowly. It was her, Kathy. She stood across the street, blinking in disbelief. Then she smiled, like she'd just spotted a long-lost dog. I didn't move. She hurried over, hair pulled back, sunglasses perched on her head like nothing had changed. I've been trying to find you, she said breathlessly. God, I didn't know if I'd ever see you again. I stood there frozen. Part of me wanted to walk away without a word. Another part needed to know why she'd come. We sat on a bench a little ways down the street away from the coffee shop. She started with compliments. You look different, she said. Stronger. I like the beard. I said nothing. Then she dropped the act. She started crying. Said she had resigned from her job. That things had gone downhill after I left. The guy she'd been seeing. He was engaged. When his fiancée found out, everything imploded. He got demoted. She got isolated. The whispers started. The looks. Eventually, she just quit. I lost everything, she said. I stayed quiet. I don't even know why I did it. It was stupid. It wasn't love. It wasn't even real. I think I was just scared of how we were changing, of how far apart we felt. I finally looked at her. So, you blew up our life for a distraction? She wiped her eyes. I didn't think it would get that far. I swear, after that night, the night you left, I ended it. Immediately. I wanted to believe her, but I didn't. Not really. She asked if we could talk more. Asked if I'd have dinner with her. I declined. I'm not angry, I told her. I'm just done. She reached for my hand. I pulled it back. You don't get to burn the house down and ask to move back in once the smoke clears, I said. That shook her. Her lip trembled, but she nodded. I get it, she whispered. I just had to try. I needed you to know I regret it. I didn't answer, just stood up and told her I needed to go. She followed me to the parking lot but didn't say anything else, just watched me walk away. I didn't feel victorious. Felt hollow, but I also felt sure. That night I ran harder than I ever had, and when I reached the top of that ridge, sweat pouring, lungs burning, I didn't think about her. Not once. Over the next few weeks, the emails slowed, then stopped. A final message came through. It was long, full of confessions, apologies, and one last plea. Even if you never forgive me, please don't forget what we had. I loved you. I still do. I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded the message to a new folder I'd made, unanswered. I told Rye about the encounter. He nodded, unsurprised. They always come back, he said. When the thrill dies and the dust settles, they start remembering who really gave a damn. I'm not sure if she ever did, I admitted. You'll never know, he said. But that's not your problem anymore. After she found me, I half expected the piece I'd built to unravel. Like her presence would pull the thread and everything I'd rebuilt would fall apart. But it didn't. I stayed put. She didn't show up again. No emails, no random run-ins. It was as if that bench conversation had drained her last bit of hope. Or maybe she finally understood I wasn't bluffing when I said I was done. Either way, I could breathe again. I kept my routines. Early morning runs, fixing up the trailer, late-night talks with Rye and his friends. I chopped wood, patched leaks, cooked over an open flame more often than I used the stove. I wasn't just hiding anymore, I was living. The land felt like therapy. The sound of wind in the trees, the distant howl of coyotes, the kind of quiet that speaks louder than any apology ever could. One evening, while running a trail that looped behind Rye's property, I came across someone. She was crouched by the side of the path, struggling with a flat on her mountain bike. She looked up as I approached, sunglasses pushed into her hair, cheeks flushed from effort. You wouldn't happen to have superpowers, would you? She asked, straightening up with a half smile. I stopped, smiled back. I've got a pump and some patience. That count? Her name was Lila, a local, just like me now. We chatted while I helped with the tire. She laughed easily, asked questions without prying. Not once did she look at me like a broken man who needed fixing, just a stranger worth talking to. That stuck with me. We ran into each other again the next weekend, literally. I was finishing a loop when she rounded a corner too fast. We both laughed as we nearly collided. Starting to think this is a pattern, she said. Or fate, I replied before I could stop myself. We started meeting up for runs, then coffee, then longer conversations that had nothing to do with pain and everything to do with possibility. I told her pieces of my story, not the whole thing, but enough to draw the outlines. She didn't flinch, didn't pity me, just nodded and said, "That's rough. But you seem stronger for it." I don't know when it shifted, when the casual turned curious, when I started thinking about her after she left. But it happened. Slowly, then all at once. She called me Mountain Man one day, teasing me for my overgrown beard and new hiking boots. I laughed. It had been a while since someone saw me as something more than a ghost of a husband. One afternoon, while we were sitting on a flat rock overlooking the valley, she asked, "So, you ever think about trying again? With someone new?" I didn't answer right away, just stared at the trees below. "I don't know," I finally said. "Sometimes I feel like my heart's still locked behind a door I'm afraid to open." She nodded. "Well, maybe you don't have to open it all the way, maybe just a crack, let some light in." I didn't kiss her, not that day. But I thought about it, and that was new. That was progress. Meanwhile, Kathy was still a ghost, until she wasn't. She emailed again, out of the blue. The subject line was simple. Update. I hesitated before opening it. Inside was a long message, not pleading this time, not manipulative, just resigned. She told me she was moving out of state. Took a new job offer, said it felt like a reset button. She admitted she had been hoping I'd come with her, that if she could find me, maybe we could try again. But now, she said, she understood. Understood that I didn't want her back, that maybe I never would. "I won't contact you again," she wrote. "But I wanted to say that I hope you're okay. I hope you found something better, someone better." I sat with that for a long time, not because it made me sad, but because for the first time I believed her. She meant it. She was finally letting go. And so was I. That night I sat outside the trailer under the stars. Rye stopped by, handed me a beer, and said, "You look like a man with less weight on his back." I nodded. "I think I'm finally getting there." He grinned. "Good, because I was worried you'd start talking to your trees." I laughed, a real, gut-deep laugh. "I might still do that," I said. "But at least now, they're answering." Back, we sat there a while, not talking much, just listening to the night. And I realized this right here was enough. For now. Months passed. Seasons shifted. The trailer, once a shelter, slowly became a home. I added small touches, a better mattress, some old vinyl records, string lights along the porch. Nothing fancy. Just enough to make the space feel like it belonged. To me, not what was left of me, and I felt different too. Lighter, not healed, not completely. Scars don't vanish. But I'd stopped checking my phone for ghosts. I'd stopped expecting the past to knock on my door with another excuse. I no longer flinched at the sound of her name echoing in my mind. One crisp Sunday morning, I ran into Lila again, this time at the farmer's market. She was bundled in a flannel coat, holding coffee in both hands. "You still haunting these hills?" she teased. I smiled. "Someone's got to keep the squirrels in check." We walked the stalls together. She bought wild honey. I bought a used paperback from an old man who ran a makeshift book table. Afterward, we sat at the edge of the market with our knees brushing, and she leaned her head on my shoulder without asking. It felt natural, no sparks, no lightning bolts, just warmth, and maybe that was enough. A week later, I got one final email from Kathy. It was short, simple. She said she'd started seeing someone new, said she didn't know where it would go, but she felt ready, and she hoped genuinely that I was happy too. No begging, no manipulation, just a last bow. I stared at that message for a long time before closing it. Then I deleted every folder with her name on it. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like air. I never responded. She didn't need words from me. She already had the silence that answered everything. Some people crave dramatic endings. Big speeches, slamming doors, emotional fireworks. But I think sometimes the most powerful ending is no ending at all. Just stopping and walking away. Ryan and I talked about it one night over beers on the porch. He said something that stuck with me. Some storms you don't outrun, you just outlast. That was it. I hadn't beaten anything. I just stood still long enough to let the damage pass. And in the stillness, I found myself again. One morning, Lila invited me to hike a ridge she loved, one with a steep climb and a sweeping view of the entire valley. It was brutal, especially near the top. But we didn't rush. We laughed. We cursed. The incline. We shared trail mix and stories we hadn't told yet. At the summit, she turned to me, her eyes full of sunlight, and said, "I'm glad you didn't stay hidden up here forever." I looked around at the endless sky and said, "Me too." It wasn't a love story, not yet, but it was a beginning. I started working more again, picked up freelance contracts, cleaned up my schedule, even thought about buying a second trailer to turn into a guest cabin. My world didn't feel like a pit stop anymore. It was becoming a destination. And you know what? I never went back to the city, never even drove by the apartment we used to share. Not out of bitterness, out of choice. Some places deserve to stay in the rear view. I ran into a friend from before while getting groceries one weekend. He'd heard about the split, some half-formed version of it anyway. He asked if I'd ever consider giving her another chance. I looked at him steady and calm and said, "You don't rebuild a home in the ashes of the fire that burned it down." He just nodded. Didn't ask again. People think forgiveness is about the other person. It's not. Forgiveness is a release valve for your pain. But letting go? That's a different beast. Letting go means no longer needing an apology. No longer rehearsing your comebacks in the shower. Letting go is when the memory no longer stings, just floats by like smoke from someone else's fire. And now I live quietly. I wake up to sunlight spilling through pine trees. I go days without thinking about her at all. I laugh with people who never knew me as someone's husband. I chop wood, I fix leaks. I answer emails with coffee in hand and music playing low in the background. And sometimes when the wind's just right, I run that ridge trail again. At the top, I stop, look out over the valley, breathe deep, and remind myself, you don't have to burn bridges, you just have to stop crossing them. That's the end of today's story. Did things turn out the way you thought, or were there some surprises along the way? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think. If you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to hit the like button. And if you haven't joined the community yet, now's the perfect time. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you're always the first to catch new stories. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next adventure.